There are millions of podcasts being done all over the world that take on the personalities of their creator. Some bring in thousands of listeners each week. Some bring in large amounts of revenue, while others entertain millions and help sell products. If you're like many podcasters, you want to reach your maximum potential. But how? How do you make your podcast stand out from all the rest? Join Dr. Barrett Matthews as he talks to experts who are doing it on The Productive Podcaster. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Productive Podcaster. I am Dr. Barrett Matthews, and I want to welcome you all to another great episode. I'm excited about my guest today. You guys will be excited too once you hear him. I want to tell you, for those of you, if it's your first time watching or listening to The Productive Podcaster, I want to welcome you, first of all, and I want to ask you, as well as everyone else, make sure you share this with everyone. Make sure you let everyone know that they can go listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, iHeart, all of those. And they can even watch us on YouTube. So make sure that you share that and subscribe and let everyone know that as well, because there are different perks for you. Also, I want you to join our Facebook group called The Productive Podcaster. So I want to make sure you guys do that. Join us at the Productive Podcaster Facebook group, because there's some perks in that for you as well. But the Productive Podcaster is a podcast for those of you out there who have a podcast that are maybe questioning whether you can do something a little different, a little better, however. Or those of you who are looking to start a podcast and you have some apprehension, you have some questions, you want to know some things about whether you should do it or not. We're here to help you with that, because what I do is I bring on podcasts for people in the podcast industry to help you, to show you that they do things in their way, and there may be someone else who does it another totally different way. But that's just to tell you that you don't have to be cookie cutter. You can learn some things from different people, but you can do the things your own way. And that's what we do here at the Productive Podcast. And so I want to start out by bringing in one of my favorite segments on the Productive Podcaster, and that is called Pros and Cons.
Pros and Cons.
Now, Pros and Cons is a segment that I do where we give you some pros, some things that you may want to do so you can be a pro in the podcast world as opposed to being a con in the podcast world. And we've been talking a lot about making sure that you sound good, not from a technical standpoint, so to speak, but making sure that you sound good. And today we're going to talk about practicing breathing through your nose. That's right, through your nose. A lot of us, we just take breathing for granted, to be honest with you, when we're doing podcasting especially, but just in general, we take it for granted because it's just something that we wake up doing. But breathing through your nose is essential, especially if you're going to be someone who's going to be talking, if you're going to be using your voice a lot, because it sounds different. And you've noticed that if you've been around someone, think about someone who may have an adenoid issue or who may have sleeping problems where they breathe through their mouth a lot. You notice that sound and how it comes across differently as someone who just breathes through their nose. Same thing applies when you're talking, when you're speaking. You want to make sure that you're breathing through your nose, because when the air is going through your nostrils, it comes out clearer, because talking a lot and breathing through your mouth a lot actually can wear on your voice. So what we want to do is make sure that you are breathing through your nose, and that will help your lungs to circulate the air better. It'll also make your voice sound better when you project and get your message out to the people. So that's our tip in pros and cons today. Make sure you are practicing breathing through your nose. So guys, when we come back from our break, we're going to take a break right now. I want you guys to make sure you tell all your friends to listen to the Productive Podcast, because I have a very special guest for you. We'll be right back right after this message.
You've heard the rumblings. You even thought about starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all of the hard work for you so that you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Productive Podcaster. I am excited about my guest today. He has a podcast called Breakthrough Success. What a name, Breakthrough Success. And I'm talking about none other than Marc Guberti. His podcast, let me tell you guys something. What he does in his podcast is he interviews entrepreneurs who are looking for digital marketing strategies, personal development, actionable tactics, things that are going to help them in their business. And I'm honored to have him on the show today. I'm really honored because he's interviewed some people like Seth Godin, Bob Berg. You're talking about John Lee Dumas, Mike Michalowicz. I have his book, Profit First. Neil Patel, Roy Vaden, James Clear, Perry Marshall, and there's others and others and others. I could go on and on, but he's going to talk to you guys about how his podcast is unique, and he's going to talk to you about what he brings to the table as far as podcast content, productivity is one of my special items, publishing, coaching, all of these things that he incorporates in his podcast, and how you can do the same or at least learn from him. So I want to bring to the Productive Podcaster none other than Marc Guberti. Marc, welcome to the Productive Podcaster.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I want to first just ask you the name Breakthrough Success. What made you come up with that?
I just wanted to come up with a name that pretty much captures the whole entrepreneurial journey. And there's a lot of ups and downs, but you feel like you then have your breakthrough moment. And it's interesting how it's not just a single moment that really catapults you, but rather a series of small moments that leads to that massive success. So I wanted to capture that whole message with a podcast name, and eventually I settled on Breakthrough Success.
That's good. I like that. I like the way you explained that. Now, how long have you been podcasting?
A little over 4 years right now. All my podcasts combined, I've definitely done in the neighborhood of 1,000 interviews.
Are you serious? Wow. So when you started your podcast, how did you feel about starting? Were you anxious? Were you nervous? Were you just trying to see what worked? How did it start out?
The big thing for me was just starting. Like, that was the accomplishment, because I tried twice to start a podcast. It didn't work. Now, at this point, I knew people who would be great fits for the show. So I reached out to 5 people saying, hey, you want to come on this non-existent, I say Breakthrough Success, the email's professional. But in reality, it's, hey, you want to come on this non-existent show where we're just starting out and I have no idea how to do this and I haven't interviewed anyone yet. Like, the way in the email is like, hey, I'm launching a new show, Breakthrough Success. I'd love to have you on. But I knew nothing about the whole podcasting. So if all 5 people said no, that was a sign we're like, okay, I shouldn't be doing this podcasting thing. But I got my first yes, and then it was just off to the races to figure out the tech, to figure out how to be a great podcast host. So being anxious, that wasn't really one of the options I had, because I intentionally cornered myself where I had to take action, or else these people who I know pretty well, and from a business standpoint, these are people who they will help with promoting the episode. They will give you the feedback. I interviewed podcasters during my first few episodes because the podcasters would always tell me what I could do to improve. So I didn't want to go up to these people and say, I am so sorry. I really thought I had this podcasting thing going, but no. It's different when you are accountable to other people versus just yourself. So anxiety wasn't really there for me.
I love it. I love it. Great answer. I love that. So you said you talked to a lot of people that you know, and they were able to help you with that. Did you have any pushback from people?
I didn't really have that much pushback. I mean, just your typical pushback, like, oh, I'm sorry, we love this opportunity, but we have to pass it this time. Maybe we could come back in a year. Like that type of email that every podcaster gets at some point. But there was no like pushback specific to my situation where it was like, get a few episodes under your belt, then come back to me. Like, maybe I got that once, but I didn't really, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Right. Gotcha. Now, as far as you mentioned something that I thought was very, very important, you said that they have no problem helping promote the podcast. That's big, because a lot of times people have guests, and especially for those of you who are watching and listening right now, you have guests on and they expect you to do all of the promoting of the podcast, and they don't promote themselves. How did you get them to acquiesce and just promote it as well as you?
Well, these were just people who I happen to know for years. So that helps. Like if I bring someone on the show and they have no idea who I am, this is our first conversation, not all of them are going to promote. So it is good to start with people you know.
That's a great tip. That's a great tip. And one of the things, because you and I, we met at a summit, and one of the things that I always recommend to people, this network. See, one of the things I did, the reason I went to the summit is because I wanted to learn more about podcasting. Well, you happen to be one of the people they were showcasing there. And I said, I want to interview him. I want to talk to him because guess what? I want to learn from you. So the thing is, it's things like that. I always tell podcasters or people that look into podcasting, don't limit yourself to just doing your podcast. Learn from other people. Go to watch what other people are doing and learn from them. What do you say to a new podcaster, someone who's looking to start one? What would you tell them other than, of course, interviewing your friends, starting with your friends?
I would say for a new podcaster, just get your hours in, get your quantity of interviews in, because like interview 1, everyone sounds terrible, but interview 100, like everyone sounds good. So it's a numbers game. Just get the more interviews you do, the better you get at your craft. At the beginning, it is good to write some questions down because you're anxious. You want to a big fear people have in the beginning is running out of stuff to say as the host and then just hoping the guest saves them or something. So at the beginning, it's good to write questions, but as you get deeper into it, you shouldn't really write any questions at all. So like my prep for an interview, all I do is I tell the guest like, hey, what are we going to talk about? And then I say to the guest like, hey, provide me your bio. Copy paste bio, copy paste topic, and I proceed from there. I don't do any question prep anymore. Yeah. I just had to know one question to lead in with, and then I let the conversation develop rather than looking at my list of questions.
I'm the same way, and I like that because, and I guess it comes with experience because you have to at first, you do have to prepare when you start out, but I guess you do have to get into a flow where you can just talk. Because I like to just have a conversation. Yeah. If I have a conversation, it's more organic, it flows better, and it doesn't seem forced. And believe me, for those of you who are watching and listening, people can tell when it's a forced interview. People can definitely tell when it's forced. Now, Marc, as far as your podcast, what would you say makes your podcast Breakthrough Success so unique?
I would say the energy that goes into each episode, my overall personality, and the personality of guests, all that meshes together. Like, notice how I didn't really say like, oh, we talk about like this angle of digital marketing, or we talk about this part of growing a business, because every podcast covers that. The reason people are going to come back is because your information is good, but that's not like going above and beyond. That's just you're expected at this stage to have good information. And if you don't have that yet, you build up to it. But it's not like people are going to pat you on the back for providing good information. You have to go really above and beyond in research and case studies to actually get some type of, wow, great content. But the thing that's going to keep people coming back is the personality, is the podcast host, the person who shows up each time, and the guests to a degree as well. So I'd say those are the things that make Breakthrough Success or any podcast stand out, because anyone can come up here and talk about like how to be a successful podcaster, but it's the way the content is delivered and who is delivering it that creates the difference.
I love that, man. Oh gosh, that. Guys, I hope you're taking notes here, because I am. This is some good stuff here. So yeah, so it's how the content is delivered. And speaking of content, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention those things over your right shoulder there, those books. So you are quite the author.
Yes, I've written definitely a few of them, and I always just look at feedback from my audience and create books based on what they want.
That's another great tip there, because I've written a few books myself, and I tell people, your content, because I have a lot of people talk to me about, oh, can you help me? I don't have the content. You have the content. You have the content. You just haven't noticed it, but it's right in front of you. So the content is right there, and I'm sure that a lot of that content that you're getting in your books, you actually can use on your podcast as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even, so I'm using my show notes book. I actually use this to write all my show notes. I don't actually like listen back to an episode. I just write the notes here. But if this is like an actual content book, I would say, oh, okay, at this point, content repurposing. And then that's going to be my solo Saturday episode. So a solo Saturday, it's exactly what it sounds like. I go on without the guest. How do I come up with a topic? Something in my book. And I say, oh, do you want to learn more about content marketing? You heard about this content repurposing strategy, but this is just one of the things I talk about in my book, Content Marketing Plaza. Get it at marcguberti.com/CMS book. So when you tie it into a book or some other product, it's an easier segue into promoting the product in your show notes and at the end of the episode.
And that's brilliant. And what you have done is you have made a product into several different uses. It's brilliant, and I think more people should do it, because I know people who are authors who have blogs or whatever, and they don't use that content for other things, and that's why it's there. Because and you and I both know that people who read books don't necessarily always listen to podcasts. People who listen to podcasts don't always watch videos. So there are different audiences everywhere, but you need to meet them where they are. Now, I wanted to ask you something that, with podcasters, especially someone who's as accomplished as you, at what point did you start monetizing it?
So I'd say about a year. It was just hobby. And it wasn't like a full out hobby, because a hobby is you don't really have any aim for it to be a part of your business. This was a hobby, and essentially yes, it was a segment of my business. It was building relationships, but at the end of the day, you have to be making money for it to be something beyond a hobby. So about a year in, I started to view different monetization paths. So most people just think about sponsors, and sponsors are great because you get paid per episode. It's a really great way to get paid, but it's usually the only option people think of. But with podcast monetization, you could also interview people who become future clients. You can interview event organizers to build the relationship, speak on their stage, and then some of the attendees become clients. You could also direct your audience to your offer. So rather than trying to find a sponsor, insert your offer in there so that people buy your thing. You may not make any money per episode, just like a guarantee in the way a sponsor would, but you can set yourself up to earn higher commissions if you choose to promote your own offer. And coaching is the easiest thing you could do. You don't need to create a landing page. You don't need to have a proven funnel. All you need to have is a way for people to schedule a strategy call with you. That's all you need for a very basic coaching business, which can really build up over time.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. Now, my last question, well, maybe my last, I don't know, but I'm enjoying talking to you, so I got to say that. Well, I want to ask you this. You have interviewed some very, very big names in the industry. How long did it take you to get to those people, and was there a challenge in getting them to want to talk to you?
So I have to preface this by saying I was doing stuff before Breakthrough Success came out. So Seth Godin came on my show for episode 16 and 292. Wow. I was on Squidoo. I knew him well. I met him at one of his events. So people ask me all the time how I got Seth Godin on. Like, I got to know the guy before, like, it wasn't a cold pitch that I was sending. And
it was a relationship.
For like the people who are getting all these different opportunities left and right, if it's not a cold pitch, if you really engage with them on social media, if you went to the event they spoke at and it's one thing to go to the event they spoke at, it's another thing to actually talk to them and they get to know your name.
Yeah.
Like that really gives you an edge. So like Neil Patel, also episode number 4 of Breakthrough Success. Mm-hmm. And that was because like I already had the blog, I already had the books. Now you don't have to, I'm not saying you need all those things to get those types of people on your show. They just have to know you. But I would suggest reaching out to all kinds of people who could provide a lot of value on your show rather than just starting right out of the gate, going for these people who they probably get 20 podcast requests in their inbox each day.
Yeah, probably so. I can imagine you probably do yourself. But now I want to just give you the opportunity before we close out here. Give everyone once again the name of your podcast and where they can find you, because I've learned a lot today just from talking to you just for this short period of time. I think everyone, I think you're crazy if you don't listen to this man's podcast. I'm just saying it. I think you're crazy if you don't listen to this. I've learned so much just in this short period of time. Imagine what you can learn over a long haul if you keep listening to him and the guests he has. So Mark, please let everyone know where they can find you.
So Breakthrough Success is the name of my show. My website is marcguberti.com. You search Marc Guberti on a lot of different places. You will find me in a lot of different places, anywhere from YouTube to a bunch of these training course sites and Amazon and everything in between. But marcguberti.com is my main home on the web. And Breakthrough Success is the name of my show.
And where's your podcast?
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. You can listen to it on Alexa, and there's a few other places as well.
Fantastic. Mark, I want to thank you so much for joining me today on the Productive Podcast. And Mark's going to stick around for a second because I want to have him on our next segment, which is PodQuest. So guys, make sure you stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this.
You've heard the rumblings. You've even thought of starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all the hard work for you so you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or just go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Productive Podcaster. As I told you, Marc Guberti was fantastic, and I'm glad that he is still with us right now because he's going to take part in our next segment, which is PodQuest.
PodQuest.
Okay, PodQuest. What is PodQuest? PodQuest is where we take a question from one of our members of our Facebook group, the Productive Podcaster. So how do you join the group? Just go to Facebook. Ask to join the group, the Productive Podcaster. You can put your questions in there, and we will answer your question for you on PodQuest. So that's what we want to do. So today's question, and Mark, I'm going to let you take it first, and then I'll take it after you. The question is, how long does a podcast have to be?
So I feel like the podcast should be as long as you as the host want to make it. There are some podcasts like a Tim Ferriss that go for 2 hours and, more power to him. I am never doing that with my show. And part of that is just understanding what the listeners like and what the guests like. So when I interview, I go for 20 to 30 minutes, but almost all my interviews hover towards the 20-minute side. And a lot of the guests are like, oh, I really liked it. It was short and sweet. Like a lot of the guests I interview, they're into business. And they have their own businesses and they don't want to spend 2 hours being interviewed when they could just do it in 20 minutes. And also you got to squeak a lot out to actually get 2 hours of content. So I'd rather go really specific with my questions, get the best questions out instead of like filler questions that just add minutes to the episode. But it is really a host by host decision. Some people, they really want to do 45 to an hour. Me, I don't like talking for over 40 minutes with the same guest usually. There are some exceptions, but I like to keep most of my episodes in the 20-minute range.
And Mark, I'm totally in line with you. I'm 15, 20 minutes as long as the interview I want to do. Because I think after a while, it becomes okay, how do I land the plane type of thing. And yeah, because sometimes I've seen it where people are repeating the same things because they're just really tired of talking. And then you think about the listener. As you said, you want to think about the people that are listening to it. A lot of people listen to podcasts as they're doing activities. I don't know too many activities that last 2 hours long that you want to just sit and listen. So I like it in bite-sized things because even if I talk for 2 hours, I would still rather break that up into several different podcasts. Because I can give my person something to look forward to. And if they want to let it play and play the next episode, it'll just play the next episode as opposed to them saying, God, when is this going to end? I don't want them saying that when I'm talking. So that I hope that answers your question. But as Mark said, it's really up to the host as to how long you want to talk. I've known people that do them for 2 hours. I've known people to do them for 10 minutes. So it's totally up to you in that regard. So Mark, once again, thank you for joining me today on the Productive Podcast. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to following you on Breakthrough Success, man. Thank you again.
It was a pleasure.
All right. Fantastic, guys. That was Marc Guberti joining us here on the Productive Podcast. Now, it's time for another one of my favorite segments on the show, and that is the podcast profile. The podcast profile is where I pick a podcast that I've listened to, and I like it, and I think you might like it too. Today's podcast profile is Twins Talk It Up. And that's with David Sook Brown and Danny Sook Brown. They are twins. It's the same name. They're twins. They do a podcast on business and speaking and leadership. And it's called Twins Talk It Up. So I want you guys to check it out. You can find them on your favorite podcast sites. Twins Talk It Up with David Sook Brown and Danny Sook Brown. So make sure you check those guys out. And guys, it's time for the giveaway. It's time for the Productive Podcast, the giveaway. And today it is Kevin James. Kevin James, guess what you're getting? You're getting an audio copy of my best-selling book, Why Didn't You Get It Done? Why didn't you get it done? You're getting an audio copy. Kevin James, you're probably wondering, well, how can I get a copy or get a giveaway? Well, all you have to do is join our Facebook group, The Productive Podcaster. Go to the Facebook group right now. Join the Facebook group, and we can pick your name where you can get a giveaway. We'll also take your questions on PodQuest. Make sure, guys, you are sharing your Productive Podcasters, telling everyone to subscribe and join us in the Facebook group, but also to listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, all of them, Google. And, of course, you can watch us on YouTube and get to look at my ugly mug for as long as you want. So on that regard, guys, it's time to get ready to close the show, but I always like to close the show with a productivity quote because this is the Productive Podcaster. And our quote for today on our pod quote, as I call it, comes from Frances J. She's Miss Minimalist. So Frances J. says, my goal is no longer to get more done, but rather to have less to do. My goal is no longer to get more done, but rather to have less to do. Now, I say that to you because it struck me, for those of you who are looking at podcasting as some chore, for those of you who are looking at it as it's some 9-to-5 job that you just don't have time to do, trust me, this did not take a long time for me to do today. It did not at all, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. enjoy what you're talking about. And I promise you, it won't seem like work to you guys. And if you're worried about the technical side, take a listen to the ads that we have on Productive Podcaster. We have Podcast Nation, who offers you a done-for-you service where they can help you do all the technical stuff. So all you have to do is talk about what you do. So check out the advertisements on the Productive Podcaster. But guys, I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank my guest, Marc Guberti, for joining us today on the Productive Podcaster. And as I always say before we sign out, guys, don't just settle for being awesome. Set your goal to all them all. And take action, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Productive Podcaster. Thank you for joining us on the Productive Podcaster. Be sure to join us next time for another great show. We welcome your engagement, so make sure you participate by joining the Productive Podcaster Facebook group and chime in. Also, share the Productive Podcaster with some of your friends right now. If you have a podcast and you're looking for guests, or if you would like to be a guest on a podcast, join our podcast exchange at www.podcastworlddirectory.com. We'll see you next time.